Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 271 based on novel. So let's start. These rays contained the effects of spatial power. It was extremely difficult to destroy them. It was almost impossible to dodge them too. This made it extremely difficult to resist them. Tang Wutong struggled before she escaped from the first hit from spiritual numbness. As her figure flashed, she arrived behind Hui Hao. Her body started to glow with a layer of purplish gold light after she moved behind Hui Hao. She appeared very dignified, and a light fog rose around her. Hui Hao shone with blue light. His icy war god armor quickly engulfed his entire body. He lifted his morning dew dagger and slashed. A weird intent was released from his body. It was one of excitement. Even the evil-eye tyrant king was affected, and felt very joyous. The rays that had locked onto his enemies earlier suddenly took a turn and shot towards Hui Hao. It was where he used his dagger. A spatial crack suddenly opened, and swallowed all 80 rays. What? What kind of ability is this? The evil-eye tyrant king was curious. This was because he was astonished to discover that he had lost control of his rays when Hui Hao slashed. Hui Hao smiled and replied, "Spiritual power. Don't tell me anyone else is prohibited from specializing in spiritual power apart from you." Yes, he was using his power of emotions. After these years of training and cultivation, he had developed his own understanding of the power of emotions. Even though it wasn't very profound yet, it was still very useful to him. Earlier, he unleashed happiness, an emotion. While that slash seemed very ordinary, it was actually a self-created soul skill. The evil-eye tyrant king's pupil shrank a little. Spiritual power. Very good, kid. No matter what happens today, I must leave you here. If I let you develop any further, you might actually threaten me one day. Hui Hao sighed and said, "I wanted to keep things harmonious between us, but you had to bring it to this stage. Since this is the case, I must kill you no matter what. You'll become my 9th soul ring. You are the one who first attacked us. Don't blame us for being merciless." As he finished speaking, Hui Hao's body started to experience changes. A beam of bright golden light was instantly unleashed from his body. At the same time, whether it was the Ice Empress, the Snow Empress or the Star Anise mysterious ice grass, they instantly fused back into his body. That beam of golden light broke the sky. The originally dark red sky was instantly torn open. Then, another beam of golden light descended from the sky and met Hui Hao's. Dense icy fog started to spread from his body. Huge dragon wings opened up behind him. Tang Wutong, who was behind Hui Hao, disappeared. As he was in his icy war god armor, whatever was happening to his body couldn't be seen from the outside. He took a step forward, and a streak of silver light appeared in front of him. Suddenly, he transcended space. Oh! The evil-eye tyrant king was astonished. When that beam of golden light descended onto Hui Hao's body, he instantly felt as if Hui Hao had completely changed. His earlier aura had completely transformed, as if he had become a being of light. The evil-eye tyrant king's pupil shrank before dilating. This time, he turned completely dark green. A terrifying killing aura spread from him. The sky also turned dark green. Only that beam of golden light that had struck Hui Hao remained. The silver light flashed again. When Hui Hao reappeared, he was 100 meters in front of the evil-eye tyrant king. The evil-eye tyrant king's tentacles were furiously reaching for him, hoping to block him. Hui Hao lifted his right hand and slashed his morning dew dagger. This time, the emotion that was unleashed was sorrow. The tentacles were guided to one side again as they were affected by this sorrow. Light of destruction. The tone of the evil-eye tyrant king's voice was very weird. Every time he mentioned a word, the air would distort strangely. His terrifying spiritual power seemed to become a real entity. At the next instant, a dark green beam of light that was around 100 meters long shot out at Hui Hao. What Hui Hao didn't know was that the longer the lights unleashed by the evil-eye tyrant king, the weaker they were. Even Dai Tian had to pay a huge price if he wanted to resist this light of destruction. However, what left the evil-eye tyrant king extremely astonished was that Hui Yuhao seemed to have become illusory after he suffered this attack. Nothing appeared to have affected him. If there were any changes to speak of, it was that there was a beautiful mermaid projection behind him. Captivating mermaid singing also started to sound. The morning dew dagger shone extremely brightly. The air turned unprecedentedly chilly. The temperature reached -260 degrees Celsius, slowing down the tentacles that were approaching. How is this possible? How is he fine after being struck by my light of destruction? Impossible, this is impossible. The evil-eye tyrant king was horrified. At this instant, he felt a huge sense of crisis. A strong beam of light was unleashed from Hui Yuhao's body. Following this, a golden hammer rose from his back, and instantly arrived in front of the evil-eye tyrant king. They were too close. The instant pressure that surfaced caused the evil-eye tyrant king's pupil to cave in a little. A strong spiritual barrier was immediately unleashed from his pupil, and clashed with the golden hammer. The spiritual barrier was immediately frozen. After this, it started to crack, and golden light shone in all directions. Blaze amidst the frost, heavenly emperor's hammer. The evil-eye tyrant king's body shook a little, but he also demonstrated his transcendent abilities as the second-ranked of the 10 great savage beasts. After he suffered this blow, his pupil turned deep blue. After this, a 3-meter-long deep blue light shot out from his pupil. When this deep blue light appeared, time seemed to stop. Hui Yuhao, who was lifting his morning dew dagger, was completely restrained in midair at this instant. Everything around him was rapidly compressing. The deep blue light was moving very slowly. However, the sky and the ground turned deep blue just as it shifted. Everything about the evil-eye tyrant king turned deep blue. Space-time light. This was the evil-eye tyrant king's highest level of understanding. He had relied on this immense skill to escape from Dai Tian's hands. He understood the strength of time through his understanding of spiritual power and space. This was the power of time that originated from his spiritual origin. The power of time could snatch away the spiritual origin of living creatures, causing their spiritual origins to weaken instantly. Even though Dai Tian had critically hurt him, Dai Tian had also needed 1,000 years to recover to his peak state after he was struck by this space-time light. This showed how powerful it was. When the deep blue space-time light struck Hui Yuhao, the frosty aura he had released turned deep blue. His entire body also turned deep blue. The evil-eye tyrant king finally heaved a sigh of relief. After he was able to unleash his space-time light, the only creature who had managed to survive was Dai Tian. In fact, the evil-eye tyrant king had to pay a huge price to unleash his space-time light. He drained his own life energy to use it. It was important to know that his next catastrophe was imminent. It was almost fatal to him to have drained his life energy. However, the sense of crisis that Hui Yuhao had brought him earlier was simply too scary. When it came to his tear, he was very confident in his own senses. He didn't doubt them at all. This was why he used his space-time light without any hesitation. Kai? The evil-eye tyrant king shook a little. A strong intent was instantly unleashed from his body. It was one of disbelief. Yes, he was in disbelief. This was because a sharp blade that was flashing with dense icy fog had stabbed right into the center of his pupil. A figure was holding that sharp blade, with a hint of the deep blue light from earlier still on him. His pupil was stuck close to his evil eye as it popped out. It was icy blue now. Yes, it was icy blue, not rose gold. An icy blue streak of light shot into the evil-eye tyrant king's pupil. Following this, another streak of icy blue light shot in once again as mermaid singing voices were heard. The morning dew dagger had completely vanished. It was completely stabbed into the huge eye. Raw, tragic and furious screams caused the entire forest to shake. Many trees were crushed instantly. The evil-eye tyrant king flew back. One of his tentacles forcibly whipped at Hui Yuhao. After this, another beam of the space-time light shot out and froze Hui Yuhao in mid-air. However, the evil-eye tyrant king was shaking tremendously. Icy blue streaks were spreading across his pupil. No fresh blood flowed out, only boundless icy frost. Even up until now, the evil-eye tyrant king didn't understand why he had lost, or how he had been hit by Hui Yuhao's fatal blow. Why? Why? Hui Yuhao was only delayed in the air for 2 seconds before he returned to normal. However, he didn't continue attacking. He turned around and fled. At that instant, he rushed out from the sonic blast. Instantly, he traveled more than 100 kilometers. He clenched his left hand and used his ice explosion technique. From afar, a terrifying boom rocked the entire evil demon forest. It lasted very long without fading away. When the helmet was removed, it was not Hui Yuhao's face, but Tang Wutong's instead. No, more accurately speaking, it should be the solitary dance amidst the frost, raiment of light. Yes, from the moment that lethal strike was unleashed, Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong were already fused together. The solitary dance amidst the frost, raiment of light gave them the ability to directly resist the evil-eye tyrant king. From their earlier clashes, Hui Yuhao deeply understood that he and Tang Wutong might not be the evil-eye tyrant king's match. It was a difference in absolute ability. However, he still chose to fight. However, it was all heaven's will. Even with the icy war god's armor, Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong could only directly resist the evil-eye tyrant king for a short period of time using their raiment of light. However, against the evil-eye tyrant king's terrifying explosive strength and immensely strong spiritual power, they could only flee. However, they still managed to kill the evil-eye tyrant king. How? Only Hui Yuhao could answer why. He had used his immunity to 3 spiritual attacks. Hui Yuhao had completely neutralized the evil-eye tyrant king's strongest 3 spiritual attacks using this immunity. It was also an important reason why he managed to survive. Since he didn't suffer from the attacks, he could easily use the buffer time after the evil-eye tyrant king attacked to counterattack with all his power. He used the Heavenly Emperor's hammer to wreck the evil-eye tyrant king's spiritual barrier. The 2 streaks of spiritual shock that were unleashed from the sigh of the frozen goddess along with the Murphic's duet fatally wounded the evil-eye tyrant king. The close to absolute zero temperature of ultimate ice was completely infused into his spiritual attacks. It was the strength of the goddess of light, a combination of Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong's powers. Everything led to that ultimate strike. Tang Wutong dazedly drifted beside Hui Yuhao. Until now, both of them still felt as if they were in a dream. Have we succeeded? Tang Wutong softly asked Hui Yuhao. That was a savage beast that's only inferior to Di Qian. He was ranked 2nd among the 10 great savage beasts. Hui Yuhao looked at Tang Wutong and hugged her. Yes, we've really succeeded. We've killed the evil-eye tyrant king. We've really succeeded. It was a close and dangerous fight. Right now, Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong's soul power was at less than 20%. If Long Xiaoyao and Yi Shishui didn't increase their cultivations to rank 98, they wouldn't have stood a chance at all. While Hui Yuhao was immunized from the evil-eye tyrant king's spiritual attacks, that still had to be sustained. If not for the fact that their martial soul fusion made the goddess of light's strength almost boundless, they wouldn't have survived the space-time light. Twice? Hui Yuhao couldn't imagine the consequences if he wasn't immunized. Even if he didn't die, he would have become a moron. Right now, they had finally succeeded. The evil-eye tyrant king had been killed just like that. Go, let's go. Tang Wutong held onto Hui Yuhao. They both flew back towards the evil demon forest. The sky was still deep blue. The evil-eye tyrant king was simply too strong. Even until now, his aura had not fully dissipated. There were dark red patches of blood on the ground, as well as big lumps of the evil-eye tyrant king's corpse. There were even a few items that caught Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong's attention. First, there was the morning dew dagger. It had not changed as it drifted in mid-air. Apart from the dagger, there was a dark red halo with 7 golden patterns. In the center of the halo, there was a dark blue pupil. It was only the size of a palm, but it was flashing with a demonic glow. What is this? Soul bone? Hui Yuhao was astonished to see what was in the center of the soul ring. For soul beasts with cultivations above 100,000 years, powerful 100,000-year soul bones would appear along with their 100,000-year soul rings. However, it was Hui Yuhao's first time seeing such a soul bone. Even in the records of Shrek Academy, there were no such soul bones. What kind of soul bone is this? Tang Wutong asked, curious. Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, I don't know either. It seems like it's an external soul bone. It should be a pupil too. I just don't know how we should use it. Tang Wutong was excited as she said, of course, you have to directly absorb it. Your martial soul is your spirit eyes. It's the most suitable for absorbing such a soul bone. I didn't expect an eye to be a soul bone too. This is too magical. Hui Yuhao brought Tang Wutong as they flew over. First, he grabbed the morning dew dagger and put it away before guiding the soul ring and bone over using his spiritual power. When his spiritual power interacted with the soul ring, he instantly felt a strong sense of discrimination coming from it. Evidently, it was the intent of the Evil Eye Tyrant King. However, this wasn't a problem for Hui Yuhao. If the Evil Eye Tyrant King were still alive, Hui Yuhao would naturally not be his foe. Now that he was already dead, Hui Yuhao probably possessed the strongest spiritual cultivation in the world. It was not an issue for him to guide the soul ring and bone over. He increased the output of his soul power and guided the soul ring and bone to the ground. It was 100,000-year soul ring with 7 golden patterns on it. Among all the soul rings Hui Yuhao had, only the Skydream Iceworm's million-year soul ring was superior to it. But the Skydream Iceworm was far inferior compared to the Evil Eye Tyrant King when he was alive. Even when he was at his million-year cultivation, he would still have to beg for his life if he faced the Evil Eye Tyrant King. Now, the Evil Eye Tyrant King had actually transformed into a soul ring. To Hui Yuhao, he was no longer just delightfully surprised. Tang Wutong was excited. Quickly, absorb it. I'll protect you. Our soul powers recover very quickly. In this forest, no one else can threaten us apart from the Evil Eye Tyrant King. Quickly, absorb it. Perhaps you might start to touch the door to your third soul core. All right. Hui Yuhao agreed before he sat cross-legged on the ground. Just as he was about to absorb the soul ring, a white light flashed before the Snow Empress crawled out. Yuhao, wait a minute. The Snow Empress was very serious as she spoke to Hui Yuhao. Hui Yuhao was puzzled as he asked, What's wrong, Snow Empress? The Snow Empress furrowed her brow and replied, I'm afraid you'll meet with problems if you try to absorb the Evil Eye Tyrant King's soul ring now. Oh. Hui Yuhao knew that the Snow Empress wouldn't warn him for nothing. He had never absorbed such a powerful soul ring before. He immediately stopped and listened to her explanation. The Snow Empress said, if that human ultimate Delure didn't give you his soul power, it shouldn't be a problem. Absorbing the Evil Eye Tyrant King's soul ring would only make your cultivation much better. However, things are different now. You have too much soul power in your body. Although you've just drained a lot, it'll recover very quickly. You can't immediately form your third soul core. Once you absorb the Evil Eye Tyrant King's soul ring, you'll likely face a situation where there's too much soul power in your body. Eventually, you won't be able to release or absorb soul power. Your life might even be in danger. This is indeed a problem. However, I didn't bring any soul ring sealing soul tools. Hui Yuhao furrowed his brow. It was luck that he could kill the Evil Eye Tyrant King, as well as because of the spiritual immunity. If he didn't absorb this 700,000-year soul ring, it would dissipate soon. Tang Wutong also creased her brow. She knew how dangerous it was earlier. In fact, both she and Hui Yuhao did conserve some power after they transformed into the Goddess of Light. They were ready to flee. Hui Yuhao even had 3 Class 9 stationary shells. No matter how strong the Evil Eye Tyrant King was, they were still enough to help them escape. Now that they had toiled to kill such a powerful creature, they couldn't bear to give up his soul ring. The soul bone was still fine. It could still be absorbed later. But what about the soul ring? However, Hui Yuhao couldn't take the risk either. No one knew how much power was contained within a 700,000-year soul ring. It was immense strength that could help even a transcendent Dolor improve further. If something went wrong, it would be fatal. No worries, you still have me. A naughty-sounding voice was heard. Following this, golden lights flashed, and one more person appeared beside Hui Yu Hao. It was the Skydream Iceworm, whom he had not seen for a long time. The Skydream Iceworm looked very delighted right now. He placed his hands behind his back, as if he was very satisfied. Brother Skydream, you have a plan. Hui Yu Hao was delightfully surprised as he looked at the Skydream Iceworm. The Skydream Iceworm was delighted as he said, I can't fight. But I'm very good at containing energy. Don't forget that I'm a million-year soul beast. I slowly transferred my spiritual power to you, but I still possess my own strength. I've cultivated for 1,000,000 years, and spiritual power is my specialization. Don't worry and just absorb this soul ring. I'll help you store whatever spiritual power's left. When you can absorb it, I'll fuse this newly found strength into your body. Won't that do? I can still be a container. Hui Yu Hao eyes brightened. Tang Wutong was also delighted. Yes. The Skydream Iceworm was a million-year spiritual-type soul beast. Ignoring his ability to fight, he was actually very good at storing energy. He had transferred his spiritual origin to Hui Yu Hao. Given the amount of energy he had released, it should be fine for him to store the Evil Eye Tyrant King's 700,000-year cultivation. Moreover, it was only his soul ring. It wasn't the immense spiritual power that the Evil Eye Tyrant King possessed. The Snow Empress furrowed her brow and asked, Skydream, are you really confident? The Evil Eye Tyrant King's spiritual power is different from yours. His is much more dominant. You must be cautious. Otherwise, if things go wrong. The Skydream Iceworm rolled his eyes and said, Are you that unconfident? It's only a soul ring. Don't worry. I've got it. Come on, what's there to hesitate about? Yu Hao, quickly fuse with this soul ring. If you can obtain his light of time, you'll strike gold. Your understanding of spatial power will ascend to another level. You might even understand the profundity of time domains. Hui Yu Hao fully trusted the Skydream Iceworm. Without his fusion then, he wouldn't have gotten where he was today. He sat down without any hesitation. Using his spiritual power as a guide, he started to fuse with the Evil Eye Tyrant King's soul ring. As for the eye bone, Tang Wutong put it away. It wasn't a good time to fuse with it now. He should only consider it when he was preparing to form his third soul core. Hui Yu Hao's entire body shook tremendously as the dark red soul ring was absorbed into his body. He only felt a terrifying spiritual intent which was strong, dominant and filled with indignation and destructive intent swarming his spiritual sea. It was surging, and was about to tear his spiritual sea apart. But Hui Yu Hao wasn't easily bullied. His spiritual soul core started to circulate quickly. His spiritual power, which carried some characteristics of ultimate ice, was slowly freezing this spiritual intent before slowly breaking it down. It purified the new spiritual power so that it could fuse with Hui Yu Hao's body. The Skydream Iceworm's strength was demonstrated next. Just like he had mentioned earlier, he devoured all the purified spiritual power into his body before sealing it. With his help, Hui Yu Hao's absorption went on smoothly. It had to be said that the Evil Eye Tyrant King's spiritual power was immense and dominant. He was indeed a 700,000-year soul beast. Just the essence contained within his soul ring was enough to completely fill Hui Yu Hao's spiritual sea. At the very start, he could still filter the spiritual power, but after a certain stage, he could no longer do so. This was because he no longer had any time. As every second passed, a large amount of spiritual energy would be released from the soul ring, and fuse with his spiritual sea. The Skydream Iceworm was strong too. At such a time, he absorbed all that spiritual power without any hesitation. He didn't even let go of the spiritual power that resisted him. He revealed his original form in Hui Yu Hao's spiritual sea. The golden light patterns that had already vanished from his body were slowly being restored. It was just that were some blood-red patterns along with the golden light patterns. It was a manifestation of impure spiritual power. Even so, he still did Hui Yuhao a huge favor. Li Ya also appeared above Hui Yuhao's spiritual sea. Even though she couldn't devour spiritual power like the Sky Dream Ice Worm, she still did her best to filter some of the spiritual power for him. She dispelled some of the brutal and violent aura. In this way, it was much easier for Hui Yuhao to fuse it into his body. In this continent, only he was daring enough to fuse with 6 spirits. Furthermore, every one of them was very loyal to him. Right now, there were no longer any conflicts between him and his spirits. They wouldn't interfere with him either. Apart from their trust in him, they also saw hope in him. Hui Yuhao's encounter with the god of emotions and subsequent recognition by were simply too overwhelming for these 6 spirits. Even though they all shared the same goal, they didn't bear too much hope when it came to ascending to the ethereal godly realm. They were only feeling lucky that they made their current choice after truly sensing a godly aura, and after realizing how the godly realm treated soul beasts. By following Hui Yuhao, they could leave this world and enter that realm, obtaining new life. What was there to whine about? They would do their best to help Hui Yuhao in the hope that they could obtain new life in that realm. It took 3 days and 3 nights before Hui Yuhao fused the Evil Eye Tyrant King Soul Ring into his body. It wasn't fully complete. This was because the Sky Dream Ice Worm's golden light patterns had completely filled his body. This was why Hui Yuhao still had to suffer from some of the brutal spiritual power. This left his spiritual sea very unpeaceful. It was as if a storm could break out at any time. Right now, Hui Yuhao's cultivation should be that of an ultimate Delure. He was even a twin martial soul ultimate Delure. He was also like a rubber ball now. He was filled with air, and could only do his best to keep himself from bursting. If things went wrong, it was likely he would face problems. Yuhao, the best solution now is to find a place for you and Wutong to cultivate quietly. It'll probably take longer for your body to absorb so much energy if you do that. However, it's the safest option. Furthermore, both of you have the potential to become ultimate Delure. The Snow Empress proposed. While Hui Yuhao was very powerful now, it was also very dangerous for him. If he faced a strong enemy and overused his powers, he might lose control of the energy that he had not assimilated yet. He would face the danger of death if that happened. The reason why he couldn't absorb all that energy was because his body wasn't adapted enough to do so yet. If he wanted to be able to handle it, he had to cultivate more to make himself stronger. However, could Hui Yuhao really find a place to cultivate now? The answer was no. There were still many matters to deal with in Radiant City. Hui Yuhao made a rough estimation. If he wanted to completely absorb the energy in his body and make a breakthrough as an ultimate Delure along with Tang Wutong, he would need at least 3 years. After they became transcendent Delure, their abilities were increasing too quickly. This made their foundation slightly unsteady. Given this, they couldn't possibly make another breakthrough in the short term. They would run the risk of running amok. However, many things could happen in 3 years. At least, they couldn't enter closed-door cultivation now. First, they had to deal with the problems in Radiant City. It was only by killing Xu Tianran and making Du Zi fulfill her 10-year promise that he could bring himself to cultivate and make a breakthrough. After listening to the Snow Empress' opinion, Hui Yuhao thought for a brief moment before saying to Tang Wutong, "Let's go. Let's return to Radiant City." He was telepathically connected to Tang Wutong. Naturally, she understood his worries. She nodded without any hesitation. At such a time, she had to support her man. Furthermore, things had to be settled at the Sun Moon Empire. Without the Holy Ghost Church, the Sun Moon Empire would be able to accumulate enough strength to attack in less than a year's time. This time, they were definitely going to work towards unifying the entire continent. Under such a circumstance, what they could most effectively do was fulfill their promise to Du Zi. It was only in this way that the two empires would get some breathing space. Hui Yuhao knew that he could stop the Sun Moon Empire in the short term, but he couldn't hold them off forever. After all, he had to challenge Di Qian the moment he became an ultimate Delure and accepted the God of Emotions seat. As for what would happen next, he didn't know. The future was unknown. However, the situation in the continent had already changed. The advent of technology had brought the entire continent under the control of Soul Tool technology. This was irreversible. After the Heavenly Soul Empire was invaded, there were many protests at the start. However, as Soul Tool technology slowly crept into people's lives, the protests became less and less vigorous. Ordinary citizens had very simple demands. As long as they could live in peace, had enough to eat, and could keep warm, they were content. Moreover, Soul Tool technology brought them a lot of conveniences. As time passed, they slowly got used to it. They even forgot what had happened before. It seemed like it was possible to reverse the Sun-Moon Empire's dominance of the continent. However, no matter what, Yu Hao had to turn back time, since he was from the Star Luo Empire, and he had to do this for Shrek Academy too. Looking from afar, Radiant City was like a huge beast. Only the Imperial Palace seemed to be a little disharmonious. This video will end here.